This is a creepy story that happened to my girlfriend. I dropped my girlfriend off at her grandmother's place for the night. I got home and, like normal, I sent her a text letting her know I made it home safely. I didn't get a response, though. I figured she had just fallen asleep or got caught up talking to her grandmother, so I just shrugged it off. Only 20 minutes go by and I get a call from a very panicked girlfriend. She's saying how someone tried to break into the house. The guy never got in because the police were able to get there in time. When I asked just what happened, she said the following happened. Her grandmother came home at about 10:30 that night from a church. My girlfriend was helping her grandmother unload groceries from the car. As my girlfriend was getting the bags from the trunk out of nowhere, this Hispanic guy in his early 20s was standing behind my girlfriend. He must have stood there for about 30 seconds, not saying anything. When my girlfriend turned around, she screamed, seeing the man with his big ear-to-ear grin across his face. He didn't say anything or move. He just stood there, towering over my girlfriend. She and her grandmother bolted to the door, leaving everything behind in the car. The man started going through the car as if he was looking for something. This went on for maybe a good 5 minutes. By then, the cops were called. The man walked up to the door and started ringing the doorbell and knocking on the door. He was saying how he knew them and he just wanted to talk, all while having that big ear-to-ear grin across his face. The next part is just really odd. He laid down in front of the door and actually went to sleep. Another 5 minutes go by and now the cops are at my girlfriend's place. The cops arrested him and started asking him questions, as well as my girlfriend and her grandmother. While the cops are getting statements from my girlfriend and her grandmother, the Hispanic man just had that ear-to-ear smile as he looked back at my girlfriend. The cops placed the man in the back of the cop car and drive away. As my girlfriend watches the car drive away, the man still has that smile on his face. I don't want to even think about what could have happened if things got even worse. Here's what happened to me one night. When I was around 15 last year, I was at home alone with my friend. Keep in mind, I live in Canada and we don't have very much crime in the city where I live. It was around 1 a.m. I was and still am very paranoid about people breaking into my house and doing something to harm me. I always kept a knife handy or some sort of a baton. My friend and I were playing Xbox upstairs, and after a while of not eating, we decided to go downstairs to get something to eat and drink. This was a big mistake. It was dark in the hallway, the only light switch being 10 feet away. Me being paranoid, I brought my baton and knife with me downstairs. I turned on the light and we proceeded to head downstairs, and when we got to the bottom, it was pitch black. We couldn't see a thing. We bumped into things trying to find the light switch, and after a minute or so of hitting our toes on tables and couches, we found the light switch and turned it on. I always felt safe with the lights on, and I placed my baton and knife on the kitchen table and went to the fridge to get some pop. But then we heard a tapping noise coming from the window, I'd say 15 feet away from us across the room. I gave my friend my knife and got my baton, and we thought it may have been the 17-year-old that lives beside us that scares us every so often. So we said. We continued to hear this noise, though, and I got a little scared, so I gripped my baton really hard. We heard a really loud bang on the window, and I knew right then it wasn't Dylan. We bolted upstairs and didn't even grab what we came down for. We were that scared. We jumped up the stairs while running, and we almost ran into the door, but I got myself to stop before the door. We opened it and shut it extremely fast, and then locked the door from the inside. I then proceeded to get on the phone to call my dad's friend, which is a police officer 5 houses down from us. But the portable phone wasn't charged. I thought we were going to die because we couldn't call the police. I just remembered that my dad has a handgun under his bed, so I slowly opened the door and run to his bedroom, not even turning on the lights. I grabbed the lock cases and the key and bolted back into my room. I frantically try and open it, and I got it open. I took out the gun and loaded it with the magazine. I cocked it back while I looked out my bedroom window to find a man standing there. He was smiling. This scared the shit out of us. We yelled at him to get the fuck out of our property before we grab our guns and shoot him. I pointed my dad's pistol out of the window, right at him. I really did not want to have to shoot someone. My hand was shaking so hard that I probably couldn't even hit him if I wanted to. It was very easy to see us from the window because we had the light on, so it was clear to him I had a gun. He ran into the surrounding woods by my house. My friend and I told my parents about this, and this scared the shit out of them. They called the police and told them what happened. They caught the guy breaking into another house a week later. The guy was caught after he had stabbed a woman who was living alone in the house. The police called me in for an interview and to see if I could identify who the guy was. He was the killer. He also confessed that he had killed other people before. I was absolutely terrified. Since then, my father bought me a firearm and put it in a secure location in my room. I hope I never have to use it, though. So I was 17 years old. My boyfriend and I were out on a farm access road. Only one way in and out. It was November. It wasn't really cold, but it was cloudy. I had my window rolled down a few inches because Bob was having a cigarette while trying to find something decent on the radio. I was sitting cross-legged with my back against the passenger door. On both sides of us was empty fields because it was past harvest. I happened to look out the back driver's seat window and saw the silhouette of two men who looked like they were carrying rifles. When they saw me looking at them, they moved to the rear of the car and ducked behind it. I should have heard the footsteps on the gravel with my window being opened, and I heard nothing, though. I went ballistic. I started locking car doors and screaming for Bob to start the engine. I never took my eyes off the rear of the car. At first he thought I was dicking with him and laughed, but the panic in my voice got him motivated. I screamed, "There are two guys out there, and I think they have guns." He turned on the lights and started to peel out of there. I fully expected to see two guys eating our dust and cursing us out at the taillights, but nothing was there. At the end of the road, Bob stopped and asked what the hell that was all about. I could barely talk, but told him what I saw. He'd been coming to this place for years with girls, and nothing ever happened. I said maybe it was the farmer with another man, and they were trying to scare us. He said this wasn't possible because he knew the farmer, and had it been him, he would have driven down the same road we were on. He lived too far away to chance walking across fields at night with no flashlights. I said, could it be illegal hunters? He said all the land was posted for no hunting because there were homes scattered along the main road that led to the access road. If they fired weapons, someone would hear them and call the police. There would have been no reason for them to run or hide from us. We were two teens in a car, and they were grown men with weapons. I was very shaken, and Bob took me home. I mulled it over in my mind, trying to find a rational explanation. Bob never saw anything, so obviously he doubted my story. We stopped dating after that night. I think I scared the hell out of him. So what did I see? I don't know if I know, but I can tell you I saw it. I am now 62 years old, and I can't remember ever being that scared before or since. Something was not right about those things that I saw. They were blacker than the night and distinctively solid, but I could see no facial features. Their movements were jerky and uncoordinated, yet they made no sound. I wouldn't even be repeating this story if not for finding a few stories like this 45 years after the fact on the internet. Just for the record, we were not drinking or smoking weed or doing any mind-altering drugs. Did I matrix the whole thing? I could have, but around here, kids always hung out in the farmlands or mountains, and I was one of them and never encountered anything like that night. I worked as a dietary aide in the cafeteria at 18 years old. It was my first job, and overall I enjoyed my stay. The patients loved me a lot, and I loved them too. Even if it was just handing them food for the day, it made me happy that they were happy. One time we got this kid who was about my age, we'll call him N. He was Chinese and was so quiet you would think the guy was mute. He never ate and usually just sat alone in the cafeteria even when I closed up. So one day on movie night I was closing up and he was just sitting there at a table again alone. The lights were dim and overall the hospital was generally creepy at night. I asked him in my softest and most polite tone I could muster, "N, don't you want to join the others for movie night?" And then he stared at me. We stood there for what felt like forever. He was completely silent and motionless, and I was sweating from nervousness by now. His eyes were empty, as if he was zoning out while staring at me. Here I am alone with a patient whose sickness I had no idea what it was. I was a little scared for my life as I felt a sense of dread coming over me. Then he stood up. He muttered something like, "Okay," and walked out. I never felt such relief in my life and hadn't realized I was holding my breath. The scary thing is that it turns out N suffered from severe schizophrenia and depression. He could not go into college because of his illness and behavior, resulting in his parents completely disowning him. It broke him even further, and I later realized why he was so quiet. He was never listening to me or real people. He was quiet because he was listening to all the voices in his head which would tell him to kill people, how to do it, and what to do with the body after. I was alone with a dangerous level schizophrenic who was listening to voices that were most likely telling him to kill me that entire time as we stared at each other. He just charged 2 days later and he never returned to our facility. But I hope he's doing okay, wherever he is now. One night I was with a friend of mine who had a stalker. She had asked me, a 6'3" amateur cage fighter, to stay with her that night as her roommate was out of town. She was terrified of this guy who she said had been following her all over the town and trying to get her to go out with him. She had male friends that probably would have been a better match for scaring away a creep than an at first unassuming female like myself. But she didn't feel comfortable asking them to stay at her house while she was alone. I reassured her before she went to sleep that nothing would happen to her and that I'd stay awake in the living room to make sure she was safe. At about 3 a.m., I heard this strange noise outside the house, followed by more noises, and I know in my gut that it's the guy. My mind flashes to other cases of stalking I know of, and I decided right there and then if he gives me the reason I'm going to hurt him so bad, he'll be crippled for the rest of his life. I know that sounds really cold, but hell, I've been described by several specialists I've been to as having psychopathic tendencies. So I tended to lack empathy and the stigma most people feel about harming another person, even in self-defense. It's what made me a good fighter. In any case, I know that stalkers, as per their psychological profile, don't give up a fixation. So I know if this creep comes in, he's going to get his ass beaten to a pulp. I just sneak quietly over to a corner of the living room in the cover of shadow and keep really silent. I hear the front doorknob jiggle, and I hear the sound of the guy picking the lock. The door opens slowly, and I suddenly feel my heart drop into my stomach as I see that not only does he have a gun, but I know him from my fighting matches. He's a fellow contender, and I've actually faced him before with a success rate that made me not want to fight him again, let alone with him having a firearm. My friend had been to a couple of my fights at my insistence as a result of me wanting to show off, and that's where he must have seen her first. I stayed as still in my hiding spot as I could and watched him quietly across the room, right towards my friend's door. I'm not used to facing down people armed with more than their bare hands, but I know how to handle the situation. And I felt for actually the first time dread and premature regret over what I was about to do. I forgot to mention that my friend and her roommate had just moved in, so there was only the couch, a TV, and a cabinet in the room. So there wasn't anything I could hit him with. I sneaked up behind him just as he was about to open the door, and quick as I could, I grabbed the gun from him and unloaded the entire magazine into him. My friend screamed to her head off, and I took a minute to calm her down before we heard her knock at the door. I grabbed the gun, thinking it could be a good bluff against any accomplices this freak had, but my friend assured me from hearing the person's voice that it was her neighbor. We let him in, and a couple of minutes later the cops whom he had called showed up. I went down to the station with them to answer their questions and was let off without getting into trouble for what I had done. A couple of weeks later, I found out that I was being charged with murder by the guy's sister, but when he got to court, the judge just laughed at her. It was quite a jump for me to kill someone with a gun instead of beat the crap out of someone with my bare hands. And it made me sick from then on out when I even thought of committing violence in any case form. I dropped out of fighting and started rooming with that same friend in order to guard against any more incidents and to surround myself with gentler people, as unlike me, she was a sweetheart. In the end, I was quite happy to trade my constitution for my friend's life, and it's a hell of a way to grow a conscience. Though it's worth noting that I've noticed the guy's sister a couple of times at the same place as I am. She always keeps a fair distance, so I assume it's coincidental. Hopefully Psycho doesn't run in the family. It was a Tuesday evening when I got a text from a coworker asking if I wanted to go on a night run with him. As I have bad knees, I told him that I couldn't run with him, but if you wanted to do a night hike, that would be just fine. He agreed, and we arranged to meet at a camping spot in the nearby canyon and follow the road up a couple of miles. Around 11:30, we both arrive at the campsite with flashlights and a water bottle each. As there were no clouds, we decided to walk by a moonlight. As we get a good 20 minutes down the road, we start hearing a rustling sound in the bushes next to us. We dismissed it as a skunk or a stray dog. We start joking around that each of us were not scared as the other and continue on our way. A truck passed by with their high beams on, blinding us. My coworker informs me that he has to answer the call of nature and heads into the next campground to pee. I hear rustling followed by a splash in the stream, followed by a rustling again. My coworker comes back running like hell and says, "Dude, we gotta bug out." His face was white as a ghost, which spooked me up because since he is in the army, I figured it had to be serious if he was bugging. We start running back until my knee feels like it's going to collapse. I hear the racking of the slide of a handgun followed by a whisper just in case. He starts half carrying me back the way we came, and I pull out my flashlight and shine it towards the bushes and stream. Squatting in the stream was a beast of a man, butt naked with the widest grin I have ever seen, and he's growling like a dog. Then he said one word in a low grumble: "Run." We dropped our packs and hauled us as fast as we could to the cars. As soon as I could see the red of my truck, I hit the unlock button on my keys. We hopped in and tore off. I figured the guy was either mentally ill or a junkie of some sort. The second we got cell service, we called the police. They met us at a grocery store parking lot and asked us to lead them to where we saw the man. He was still sitting on top of my coworker's car waiting for us. He growled at the cops who tackled him and put him in cuffs. The officer turned the light on in the patrol car, and the man just smiled at us with that same wide grin. As they pulled away, he yelled out of the crack of the open window, "Not fast enough. Neither of us have gone out alone past dark since, and we never heard what happened to this guy." Years ago, when I was a child, I was selling Girl Scout cookies around my neighborhood. Back then, parents were more relaxed and didn't mind a child going door to door on their own as much as they do today. I lived in a safe neighborhood where nothing really happened to. I was going house to house, but I wasn't having much luck. I saw this red car pull up in the driveway, so I ran to catch them as they exited the car. I was desperate to make some sales. I saw there were 3 of them as they got out. 2 elderly people, 1 male, 1 female, and the third person was a young woman in her 30s. The elderly people saw me and got really excited. From far away, I thought their eyes looked black, but I assumed it was just because of the distance between us. I didn't make anything of it, but I thought something was off about them when they started excitedly running towards me. I put a smile on my face and said hello as they were running up, but my smile turned into an expression of horror when they came right by me, and I saw that their eyes truly were pitch black. They had no whites in their eyes. They looked down at me with huge smiles on their faces. I just froze in place with fear. They looked at each other for a second, and the woman said something to the man. I was so afraid that I didn't understand what she said. They looked right back at me. They were slightly bent down and just right in my face. The woman who was with them ran up, took their arms to pull them away, and sincerely apologized. She said, "I'm so sorry," and hurried them inside. As soon as she took them and went towards the house, I became unfrozen and ran almost all the way back home. When I slowed down, I started to feel bad. I rationalized to myself that maybe they had some kind of disorder that made them that way. I mean, they did behave like 2-year-olds. I looked it up years later to find a disorder that matched what I had seen, but I couldn't find anything. Still, I thought maybe it was just a rare disorder, and that was why I couldn't find anything. It wasn't until a few years ago when I found out about the black-eyed children from a friend. This raises so many questions. Who were those people? Why did they have black eyes? Why was that woman caring for them like they couldn't care for themselves? If the theories that these black-eyed people are really alien human children, then what are they doing living in a human neighborhood? Maybe the combination messed up their genes and made these 2 mentally ill. I'll never really know what the hell they were and why a normal lady cared for them. Makes you wonder what people know that we don't. I lived in a peaceful society. There wasn't any violence or any worries, really. Coming from Canada, you normally wouldn't expect any sort of crimes. This incident occurred almost 3 years ago now. I used to live in Mississauga, where I lived. There were many forests and parks. I lived in this city for 5 years, and I felt very confident at the time, and quite frankly, my parents were the chill type. It was the winter, and it felt depressing staying at home, and I'm not going to lie. I didn't have a lot of friends, and the friends I did have were all moody assholes. It wasn't a lot of things to do in my area, to be honest. It was always boring, but we had a lot of parks around our apartment. So my friend and I would go outside and play in the snow, just to make it a bit more fun. Brandon didn't live that far from me, and he was better than my other moody friends. Brandon and I would go around doing anything, parkour, snow fight, and explore around the city. It was late, and Brandon and I were at a park opposite from my building. About 10 minutes walk. We also had a park right next to my building, but it didn't have a lot of variety. Now, if you live in Canada, you would know how cold it is here. And if you don't have gloves or the proper clothing, then you're not going to have a good time. We were at the park and playing and doing all types of stupid shit you can imagine 13-year-olds doing. It was around 8. My friend Brandon had strict parents, and they demanded that he would come back max 8 o'clock. I didn't want to stay there by myself, so I went along with Brandon. We were talking about our crushes while we neared the apartment. Brandon went his way, and I went to my apartment. And as I got home after 10 minutes, I realized I didn't bring my gloves. I messaged Brandon on Facebook asking if he had them, but he said he didn't. I realized I left them at the park. I accepted the loss and carried on. The next day it was at least -15, and I worked to my mom yelling at me about my gloves. It wasn't about the price. It was that my mom thought I wasn't responsible. I told her I gave it to Brandon. It was Saturday, and it was an off day. It was 5 p.m. now, and I was really bored, sadly. All my friends were busy, and I didn't want to stay at home. I hurried out and geared up for the cold. I told my mom I was going to get my gloves from Brandon, and as I went outside, clueless what to do, I went to the park. I just went to the swings, rocking back and forth. Time had passed, and it was around 8:30 p.m., and I decided it was time to go. As I was about to go, I saw what seemed to be 2 people walk down the park. There was only one footpath leading to the park, and there was also one exit. I didn't really think anything of it, just some people walking through the park. That was huge, and this was before my eyes were all stuffed up. As I got closer to these people, they started staring at me. I didn't really have an option at this point, so I just decided to walk away from the footpath. As I got closer to them, I saw them go deeper into the bushes. I thought it was weird, but they were probably a couple doing their business or something. As I walked further, I had to go on the footpath as there was nowhere else to go. At this time, I couldn't spot the people. At the time, I didn't know what to think, but it was my alarm to get out of there. As I was going out in the back near the bushes, I could hear some mumbling noises and the noises of footsteps in there. I didn't look back. I just got out. As I got out of the park, I felt relieved, and I felt a little stupid for causing so much drama. I decided to go nearby my convenience store, which was only 5 minutes away, and as I was walking to the store, I could hear sirens in the background. I got in the store and I bought a Red Bull. I waited for my turn, I paid the amount, and headed out to look around at the time. It was around 9 p.m. now. I ran down the road quickly, and after what felt like minutes, I got near my apartment. As I got there, I saw 3 police cars and 1 canine dog car. I went over and asked him what happened. He told me it was nothing, and he asked me to leave as they were blocking the exits. I told him I was just at the park. He laughed for a second and asked me again, but this time he looked a bit confused. He took my summary, and I told him clearly what happened. He took my address, and I asked him what happened. He explained to me that they were looking for 2 suspected people for child abduction. At that point, my heart sank. I could feel my hair and my body spike up. It all made sense that they were hiding from me, waiting for me to pass by. Till this day, I still get chills thinking about it.